For years, podcasts have been sold to business owners as the one solution for all of your problems. And while myself, as a podcast content strategist and marketer, do believe that yes, podcasts are incredibly powerful for almost every business owner, the truth is that many different ways to monetize a podcast mean many different strategies. And I often see, after working with podcasters all over the world, 4 out of the 5 continents, that are making the same mistakes. And kind of, not to be dramatic, but to say that many times they're bleeding money or missing out on real monetization opportunities because they're seeking strategies that are not aligned with their business model. But what if I told you that by identifying some of these elements could completely transform the impact of your podcast and your business? Well, my name is Anna Xavier. I'm the founder of The Podcast Space, and as a podcast marketer and content strategist for over 15 years, I've seen many things. And so in this podcast episode, we're going to be talking about the 5 most common mistakes that business owners make that is costing them loads of money on their business. Let's dive right into this week's episode of The Podcast Space. And let me tell you that the last one you're likely never thought about. So let's go. If you are tuning in right now, a couple of things. If you're watching this on YouTube, yes, I am back from Paris. I did last week's episode in Paris with my friend Yesenia Bocanegra. It was such a cool experience. And again, talking about opportunities for podcasters. I mean, my show took me to Paris because Yesenia, through podcasting, found me, and then we became friends, and we got to hang out in Paris, record podcast episodes, and also I had business meeting. I had a business meal in Paris, a business talk over lunch. I also got to record a podcast episode at the Asha offices in Paris. That was such a cool opportunity. But again, it's all about how to strategically leverage your podcast. So let's look into some of those biggest mistakes that I see business owners make. So let's start on kind of like number 5 all the way to number 1. So number 5, I see that a lot of people are looking at business owners who have been podcasting for a long time or are incredibly influential. And so they look at deals like the Netflix deals and the Spotify deals and the Samsung deals, and they go, I definitely want to go exclusive as well. And kind of hand in hand with that is the people who say, hey, join my network. And people can only access your show through either my network, or through an app on a TV. And as a side note, I want to just make a little quick side note. I've been seeing a big trend on YouTubers or business owners who have been, doing their business for a while, that they're all looking to do kind of their own TV, like the Sorry Girls have Sorry Girls TV, and there's, I think, through an app. And then Rachel Rogers, she also is creating her own TV show. So that's like something that is really interesting. I don't think the Sorry Girls have a podcast, but Rachel Rogers does have a podcast. So I'm very curious to see where that trend goes. However, let's go back and talk about these deals. And looking at the Joe Rogans of the world, call her daddy, right? And there's a lot of people who look at those and say, I want exclusive deals too, right? I want to be paid thousands, if not millions of dollars to have my content exclusively played on one platform. And here's the thing. That is true for people who have a big reach and can afford to not be everywhere. If you are a business owner, you need to be everywhere. And I'm sorry if you've been sold on joining a network and only having your content accessed through that network on a website. That is not a great return on investment for you, because you want people, if you're looking at your podcast analytics, which I always recommend that people do, you want to look at the percentage of people that are consuming through different channels your podcast. So and looking if that's relevant or not. But like, I really see this time and time again where we're looking at all of these numbers, and sometimes it's diversified. And so I would not want your listeners who could become clients of yours to not be able to find you because they use a specific app. So for instance, of course, your podcast is going to be on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. But for instance, in Spain, there's a podcast app called iVox, but iVoox, it has 2 O's. So I can't recall how you actually pronounce it. But it's one of those that, again, it's very used for the Spanish segment. And so if you have a lot of clients that that speak Spanish or are based in Spain, you would want to ensure that you're there. So that's kind of like one of the biggest mistakes, is not being mostly everyone thinking about that you can implement those strategies that is like just exclusivity. And then number 4 is the idea that you don't need to talk about your products and services because people go and search for them. So no. If you've been listening to these podcasts long enough, you will probably hear me say a lot. And if it's the first time you're listening into this podcast, let me tell you, I work with this. I work specifically with content strategy and realigning what people talk about on the show and how they market the podcast with their products and services, with their business goals or their personal goals, because we want to have like a very, very obvious connection between what you talk about and what you sell. And so here I see 2 types of mistakes. So number 1 is literally never talking about the things that you actually work with clients. Most of my podcast episodes cover topics that I know happen in the heads of my ideal customer, right? A lot of mindset issues, a lot of kind of thinking that it's not okay to promote the podcast multiple times, and how do I promote it, right? I talk about the things that I know I want the person listening to realize and self-identify to those problems and go, oh wow, like I am one of those people. I need Anna's help. So when you're looking through your content, are your podcast episodes the things that you help solve with clients, right? So when you're looking at the episode titles, are they aligned with the pain points of your clients? Are when you're looking at the depth and expertise level of the things you talk about, and I see this as a clear example, is that there's a misalignment. This is number 2 within this segment, which is a misalignment between the expertise level or the expertise content to your ideal customer. So an example of this, let's say in here on these podcasts, I talk about content strategy, marketing, mindset, and a lot of how to leverage the podcast for visibility, right? A misalignment would be that I would talk about your podcast setup, right? And so even though I play around a little bit on Instagram and kind of like show you behind the scenes because I want you to play more with your show and experiment different things, I know for a fact that if I was to start talking about podcasting setups and podcast equipment, I mean, again, look at me. I'm like one camera setup, microphone directly plugged into the computer. That would not be me. I do not want to attract that kind of customer. Or I don't want to talk about the things that are easy to me just because and riff off those because it's just easier to do in the moment. And so I see a lot of times people who had their business kind of like move and transition from one area to another. So for instance, serving clients that have like a basic expertise to medium or advanced, and they keep continuing talking about those things that are basic, and I'm like, well, that's not the kind of client you serve anymore. And it's not, for instance, like the DIYers, is the people who want the done for you, and that's like a big tweak that I think is important. A lot of people miss out on opportunities for that because they keep focusing on the thing that was like easier to talk about or that comes that they can talk about for forever, but that's actually not the kind of like thing that they need to be talking about. You're missing out on creating that journey that takes people from listener to lead to customer. So I want you to think about like what you've been doing, right? So either you are not talking about your products and services at all, you're not talking about those problems, or there's a misalignment. So number 3 is actually not making ad breaks. So this is one of the things that you can do very easily. And this is like where people missed opportunities, is that you want people who are listening to the podcast to kind of see where there would be opportunities for them collaborating with you. And so what that means is when they're listening to the show, if you had ad breaks, and an example of this would be, we'll be right back on this conversation with blah, 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 blah. We'll see you after the break. And then you would have the break, and then after we go, and then we're back with our conversation with so-and-so. If you wanted to create a more generic one, it would be like, and now onto our quick sponsor ad or sponsor break, and we're back. So especially important if you have a podcast that is both a solo podcast with interviews, because otherwise it sounds weird. There's like back to our conversation with so and with our guest. And it's like there's no guest, right? So you want to make sure that there's like no issues in that sense. And I find that there's a lot of big podcasters that actually make that mistake. So if you have never implemented this, or if you have, make sure that this is actually like a copy that works for both those formats. Or even if you have like a webinar, right? Or live stream, that there's no misalignment. So when you're including those ad breaks, I think that is really important to signal, because when an advertiser is potentially thinking about working with you, looking at your show, and they're looking at the easiest way possible, right? To give you money in that sense. And I think that is something to consider within this segment of like making your show sellable, should we say, and having those breaks. I want you to stop thinking about programmatic ads. And what I mean by this is that it's ads that, for instance, your hosting podcast platform has. So you're paid, $25 per 1,000 listens. And I don't think that makes sense, because I can promise you, and that's something that I've worked with many clients. And if that's something that you want to do, we can work together to get that. But secure sponsorships within people in your network. They like you, they trust you, they've seen you work. So even if you're looking at an audience that maybe it's under, 1,000 downloads per episode, or even 1,000 downloads per month, it is possible to land sponsorship deals with people already within your network. But you have to be strategic about the people that you identify. And it's funny how I'm finding myself like doing a lot of this with clients, because people are realizing that podcasting isn't going anywhere. Audiences are really engaged. And I have a few podcast episodes on this, one of them with my guest, Justin Moore, who is a sponsorship coach. And we recorded such an amazing podcast episode, which I'll include in the show notes. And there's a couple more that I will include there. So I highly recommend that you check the show notes. But just kind of going back to your network, right? There is a way to make more than $25 per episode when you start looking through the right strategy. Because when you're looking at those ads, if you're just relying on a third-party app where someone is uploading their ad and then playing it through your show, you just have no control of who these most people will not look at who is the company that they're advertising on their podcast. And then number two, the return on investment is going to be really low. So I want you to think about, for instance, a couple of examples. Some of my clients landed one sponsorship for one podcast episode for about $950. Right. And so it wasn't just including something on the episode. It was kind of like a podcast episode with a newsletter, and then kind of usage rights. Or another one was creating a little like segment for them to use, or little different things that enable them to create a return on investment that was way higher than if they were using that programmatic ad. And so before we move, I just want to say making ads creates a structure that can accommodate ad breaks for those who do not know what that means. Sometimes, and for instance, like a great example of this is like whenever I'm having conversations with my husband, for instance, I'm someone who can picture, who can visualize without seeing something, I can imagine it. And so my husband, he's like, paint me a picture, but I don't know if I'm there. Show me a tutorial. Show me an example. And so there's people, especially who are not comfortable with podcasting just yet, they need to see it in action. And so if you have those breaks, you can sometimes even mock up an ad as an example and send them over an episode, and then they will be able to see it. And then number two, we're getting close to number one, but number two is not wanting to sell because it's icky, because you can only educate. And this is a misconception that I find has come from, again, many people that are all about like the serve your community a lot. But the way that marketing has shifted in the past, I would say probably like a year, is that the volume of content has just increased so much that we need to be more obvious about what we do. For instance, in this podcast episode, what I have been doing is not only say like, and I do this with clients, I'm giving you a lot of examples throughout so that you self-identify, right? And multiple moments within this episode that you go, interesting. I wonder if she could work with me on this. And then another episode, you listen to it again, and then different example, and then the call to action, right? So there's multiple touch points that I think are important. And then before it was like educate. Don't really sell right away. Don't sell. Again, you need to obviously provide value, which is not the same as never talking about your products and services. And this is something that I see with impact-driven podcasters. I see that time and time again when they're saying, but Anna, like I cannot talk about what I do. That's kind of like too salesy. I mean, if you're not using like a case study, if you're not using consistent breaks where you're using testimonials, and I have my guest Denise Thomas that will be coming up later in this season, is a perfect example of someone who is integrating that very, very well. But if that's not something that you do, you need to talk about the products and services that you do on your podcast, because again, imagine how long it's going to take for people to be thinking about themselves as your ideal customer if you never talk about exactly specifically what services you offer, right? So I give you examples on these podcasts. I have one podcast episode that talks about exactly how I help podcasters create easy templates for a newsletter, how I work on coaching, right? So I am telling you that I do those services, but that I also talk about specifically within the episode. Those are pieces of content that I always weave into the knowledge, right? So we have to stop saying, well, I'll put it in the show notes, or, oh, well, I'll leave it until the end, and then on the last call to action. I want to remind you, how many times have you just basically like switched off or skipped to the next podcast to the next podcast episode or next podcast, like from another creator, as soon as they say, well, so, thank you so much. You skip it, right? So you are not even getting to that call to action at the very close section of the podcast. So think about how you behave, and maybe sometimes, not always, your audience could behave like that too. So you would be missing out if all you're doing is just educating, and just selling at the very, very end. All right. So I think that it's time to talk to you about number one. The biggest mistake that I see that most people don't realize that they're doing this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you could have been monetizing the podcast from the very beginning. And that is number one. I don't have a drum roll, but drum roll. It is the fallacy of affiliate marketing over your products and services. And so this is such a problem that I see, and that most podcasters are spending, sometimes $200, $300, $500 per episode. And then at the end, they're like, oh, this episode was brought to you by, and then insert, like a SaaS company or a membership in which, or then even like my Amazon store or whatever. And the return on investment for that, like if one person buys one product from, let's say like you're promoting a skincare product or something like that, you're going to get, let's say 20% of a product. I mean, it's going to be under $100 for sure. For most cases, especially if you're promoting it like a membership or a SaaS company, you're going to be making just kind of honestly like sometimes less than $10 per purchase. And if you're looking for the volume, you're fine. But if your podcast is small and has a niche, why would you look at the cents instead of the hundreds of dollars? And let me give you an example. And not once, not twice, not three times. It has happened multiple times and across industries that the podcaster was giving a lot of prominence to this affiliate marketing, and then only at the very end talking about their products and services, or not even, because they're like, well, I'm already promoting this affiliate product, so of course, like I can't do too many cost action, because then at the end, like people are going to be really overwhelmed. Friend, no, we're not doing this. So I want you to think about, if you were to sell, a coaching program, it's like this specific client was promoting these tool that she was using. And then basically her coaching program was a minimum of like $7,000. And I'm like, Explain to me what's the return on investment here. Of course, it all rooted in kind of following advice from content creators and not business owners or people who were strategically looking at how does the podcast position their expertise and also their business. And they were just thinking, okay, like I will get eventually, like these will get traction, I will get a lot of money, like that passive income lifestyle, when they could be making $7,000, right? Or even if you have your very own product, like for instance, a newsletter guide like I do, promoting that product instead of someone else's. I mean, my cheapest product is $95. That's the newsletter guide. That's the cheapest downloadable that I have. So if I was to promote that instead of, like, for instance, like I'm an affiliate for Captivate, every single time someone that uses my link and subscribes using my my unique URL, I make $4.95, right? So that idea that passive marketing is great, yes, sure. Like last year I made $500 from affiliate marketing, but you never see me marketing Captivate, for instance, right? I have that link in the show notes. I still make sure that people can access it, but I don't give it real estate on the podcast per se. I may mention it every now and again. Hey, like this is the platform that I use to host my podcast, but I am always talking about my products and services. And so my coaching program that is for 6 months and basically it's $9,000, so $1,500 a month, but I have like a product that is a bit more expensive and a product that is more affordable, so I can do the upsell and downsell. So again, not always like this will be the case, but you are setting up your business and your content for success when you are effectively using what makes more sense, what gives you bigger return on investment. And so I find that a lot of times people are just a little uncomfortable with selling on the podcast. And that's exactly why you need a podcast strategist. My God, like I'm selling so much on these episodes. Look at me. Pff, wow. But that's why it's important to work with someone who understands different behaviors and different ways to position the podcast. And so let's kind of like quickly recap over here. Number 5 is making sure that you're actually not giving exclusive distribution to one platform or another or a network. If you are looking to expand your reach, unless, and this is something that I didn't say, unless that company can prove that basically their network or that exclusive deal will make you with specific data, client testimonials, they will prove that is a good business decision, right? So if that's not the case, try to be everywhere, including YouTube. And then number 4 is not having an integration between the content that you have and the level of expertise that your audience needs to have in order to work with you. Number 3 is not making ad breaks that, in that sense, they don't signal that you're looking for sponsors. Number 2 is not wanting to sell because all you got to do is educate. And then number 1 is the fallacy of affiliate marketing versus selling your own products and services. So I hope you're taking notes of this podcast episode and that you do reach out and work with me on realigning your podcast strategy to make sure that you can successfully monetize your podcast next year or even this year, that we can look at the strategy you've been implementing and what you need to do that is sustainable, that feels aligned, that in a way that you can start making money with your podcast, right? So whether that's directly monetizing through your business or making those connections with sponsors that are so aligned that will help you grow your show, invest back into your business and in yourself through those partnerships. All right. So I will say everything that I mentioned on this podcast episode will be in the show notes. Visit thepodcastspace.com. And if you're listening on YouTube or on Spotify, you can always leave a comment. I would love to hear your ahas, things that you're about to implement, and just share with me what you're going to be doing and what you're kind of like right from this episode, recognizing that you need to change. So I've been an Xavier. I had such a pleasure explaining all of these amazing nuggets of podcasting for you, and I hope that I see you in the next episode. In the meantime, create imperfect content that moves you forward.